I was originally from the Deep South and at Memphis. And I went to graduate school at Cornell, and from Cornell I came to Kingsville at A&I, and I taught there for about 4 years and got used to what South Texas was, because I really never much more than heard of Texas until I took the job down there. And when I got off the train the first time, I rode a train down from Memphis, and it went so long and long, and I got off and I walked very carefully because I've heard of the edge of the world, and I thought I was there. After 4 years at Kingsville, I had an opportunity to come down here, and I was very interested in Mexico and the wildlife in Mexico, and this is just one step away, so I came on down here. Been here ever since 53 actually. And I have been fortunate in being able to take classes on field trips to Mexico. 1980, I think, I took a graduate group, and we spent about 3 weeks in the field in Mexico on environmental things. I enjoy the birds, and the plants are particularly nice here. We have a lot of vegetation in the refuge that does not necessarily occur widespread. Santa Ana was established years ago, I've forgotten, 46, I believe, or 43, somewhere back in the 40s. And this was one reason the local people asked to have it set aside, because of all the rare plants they had here, as well as birds like chachalacas and green jays and kiskadees and things like that. And I don't know, whenever I come, I feel like I'm at home to come to an area like this where you don't have to worry about traffic running over you while you're looking at birds or enjoying the plants or whatever phase of wildlife you're more interested in. there was a severe drought in the early to mid-50s. In fact, when I came down here in '53, it was quite dry. They completed Falcon Dam in 1953. I remember Eisenhower came down. This was in the period of time when they didn't have enough water or any flooding in the river, and they couldn't get water from the river to irrigate, and some of the people in agriculture had put in a lot of deep wells so they could grow the vegetables. And all of this happened at about the same few years. And the big elm trees started dying. And Luther Goldman was at Laguna Atascosa, and this was just like a satellite of Laguna. And he couldn't figure out what, and elms were dying of Dutch elm disease in the north. So he contacted people in Washington or Albuquerque or wherever, and they sent specialists out to check them, and it was not the elm disease. And I have been told in the past by some people who were more in geology that the thing that most likely happened, and sometimes does happen, this lowered the water table, damming the river in the drought and all, and putting in deep wells. Everything combined probably lowered the water table, and whether salt water came in or not, sometimes it does, that this was probably the cause of it. I don't know, and nobody has any proof of that, but the big elms are gone. The biggest one I've seen is one about so big now, and they were huge, big trees. You see where some of them die, some of the bigger ones all along. And I know I lived in a place up the country at Kingsville, and they said, they had good water. You had to go down 1,200 feet to get it. Some of the youngsters, couple of college students I was talking with this morning, asked some question about, well, why were there so many different unique forms of plants and animals all down here? Well, really, it's based on habitat, and we have so many different types of habitat here that are unique in themselves. I don't know how many different biological or ecological areas that they have designated from the coast to Falcon, where each one is, of course, has some of its own special things in it, but we have a wider variety of habitat here than for the area than most anywhere. That's why Texas has so many more species of birds. There are more species of birds and different species in Texas than any other state. We have, in the valley proper, more than 350 species in this small area. We were talking about the values of areas such as Santa Ana and the habitat that we have left in South Texas, and one of the very significant things that a lot of people overlook is, well, it's nice and you have birds down there and all of that, but they don't realize that the birds you have up north are affected by what happens here in the South Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley, because we are in an area where your migration flyways, where they more or less join here, they funnel in. We're the narrow part of the funnel. And along the coast, a lot of them come right down the coast, and a lot of them come overland, of course. And they have places like Santa Ana then to stop over, to rest during migration, and to, get a little food along the way as they come or go. And then, of course, the ones that are going on south and go on down along the coast, you are aware so many times, unfortunately, people aren't aware of these things because a lot of the birds migrate at night and they don't see them and they don't realize it. But every now and then we have weather problems, And we have had several. Back in the early 50s, it wasn't down here, but Corpus Christi is still South Texas. We had a tremendous kill-off there because we had bad weather and a late norther and rain on the coast, and when the birds got to the coast, they were exhausted. And a lot of them coming in hit lights and wires and things like that. And down here, even in the valley just last October, I can't put a handle on how many birds were killed. It had to have been thousands because we picked up, I would guess, almost 1,000, if not more than 1,000. We are still in the process of tallying them. We had to freeze them and do them as we could get to it. But we have a lot of radio towers and television towers and various other towers. And if weather conditions are just right and the ceiling is low and the birds are moving, they hit. Well, you'd think the tower itself is not too large, and a lot of people think that they're attracted to the lights of the tower and they flutter around and finally kill themselves in that way. And they used to do that in celiometers, and they changed the lights or the type of light. But these towers have very few lights. Some of them do attract some of the birds. But from the ones we picked up, we noticed that the east and west guy wires, where they ran off from the tower itself, and some of them are very tall towers and ran considerable different distance. We picked up such things, some birds that I rarely have seen. Well, one bird that I don't know if I've ever seen more than one live one was the Swainson's warbler. And we picked up 4 dead Swainson's warblers. We picked up at least 100 dead Baltimore orioles and yellow-breasted chats, about the same number. And we even got some pied-billed grebes and about 20-something sore rails. If we were going to try to reestablish it, as we hope to, the habitat here, what we have to do is have a space, land, and if it's brushland, but there's very, very little brushland left. There's less than 5% of the native brush left, even that was here when I came here 35 years ago. And there's so little left that if there's any that's available, we need to save that. And then for instance, in some cases, if a farmer sells his farm or quits farming in some areas, if they release that land or put it up for sale if it can be bought and vegetation reestablished. See, this used to be called the Magic Valley. Now some of us rather refer to it as the Tragic Valley, but it still has the potential of the magic. And if we get land that doesn't have brush on it, we can go in and plant native vegetation, and given a few years, it will return. If we could get a green belt or corridor along the, well, it doesn't, when you say along the river, it doesn't have to be right on the edge of the river, but along that area, and especially since there are a number of smaller of areas that vary in acreage, and if there's enough of a belt or corridor established between those, I think it would make for continuous use, you know, would develop more as far as wildlife is concerned, and native vegetation if the habitat were there. And I think the public would be much more aware of what the country is like and what it could be like, and certainly most everybody enjoys seeing some of the, even the more common native wildlife. And if we had this sort of thing established, they could see a lot of things that they won't see otherwise. It's gotten to the point where even some of the common animals, they just don't see nearly as many bobcats, for instance, as you used to see. And it would give people a place to go. You know, the public likes to get out and drive around and see these things. And if we have areas in various parts of the valley, then it would give the people a chance to, they wouldn't all have to come to Santa Ana and wear it out. Well, personally, I think the cowbird has been one of the main things that's changed it. And there are so many more cowbirds because land use has changed from what it was earlier. And after the first freeze in citrus, a lot of citrus was taken out and they grew cotton for a while, but then the cotton gave way to grain, and that's encouraged the blackbirds, quote unquote, the various species, cowbirds, grackles, redwings, and so on. Actually, they parasitize their nest. They simply move in, and they don't normally destroy the eggs of the other bird unless they lay so many in there that some of them get broken. But I have found green jay's nests with 3 cowbird eggs and 2 green jay eggs, and a lot of them that would have survived, you know, don't. Of course, it's not just the green jays. It affects the other too. I can give you a little, for instance, a neighbor of mine, in fact, when I came here in '53, Mr. Holloman had been living, he was an automobile dealer, and he'd been living in this same place and still lives there in the neighborhood where I live now. And he put out food for the birds, and he had lots of green jays. In fact, I took Dr. Allen when he came down from Cornell. He was down on a tour, and he went over to Mr. Holloman's home to his bird feeder and set up a camera and everything. And at that time, they were having 15 to 20 or so green jays come every day. Now, if they have 2 or 3, she calls me on the phone and tells me, oh, we had 3 green jays today. And that's 30 years back when they'd have 20. I really think that the only thing would be to reduce the blackbird population, blackbird, cowbird, so on. But as long as we have a lot of grain crops. Of course, that isn't the only thing, because grackles are becoming common in further north areas and so on. And there is just an overall change. So much of the worldwide habitat's been changed, and the destruction of rainforest in the tropics and all has some effect on our situation here too. So it would be hard just to, the best way that we can improve the numbers, of course, of any of these forms is to replace as much natural habitat as we can, so that they do have a normal place to live. If they did, they probably would scatter out enough so that they wouldn't be molested as much by these parasitic nesters. But I'm afraid there's no easy answer. What you see in the refuge at Santa Ana is a little bit different situation than you see, I would say, between green jays and, between grackles and chachalacas and all, because there are very few, number-wise, chachalacas in other areas. They are in brush areas, but Santa Ana is the most suitable. And as they've destroyed other brush around here, that pushes more and more chachalacas in. I'm sure that we probably have a good bit larger population of grackles now than we had. Now I know we have a lot more grackles than we have. I think we perhaps have more chachalacas in the given area because there's no place left to go. And that's true with so many of the species. About the only thing we can hope to do is to save what habitat we have left and try to restore other areas. Several people have mentioned just this spring that they haven't seen this kind of vegetation, that is, the foliage that we have this year. It had been years since they'd seen it. So what they were wondering about it, and saying, how come it's so much nicer? Well, we haven't had a lot, at least in some of the areas. They haven't had much rain. In some areas we've had good rains, but over the entire area, in the parts of the valley that are dry, normally drier than other parts, it rained continually, just, slow misting rain. And we had weather that people complained bitterly about. But it did that so much for weeks at a time. We'd get these misty rains all day and night. Not a lot, but continually. And the vegetation is nicer, the plants are better, and everything that's been in years. And given a chance, these areas will come back if we can get native vegetation on them. And I think that's our only hope. If we can get the habitat, if we can get the land, if it has vegetation on it, fine. If it's protected, it'll work out all right. But if it is not protected, if it has nothing left on it growing, well, we have to go in and revegetate. You'd be amazed at how many people are becoming interested in it, and how many of them go to the nurseries that do have a few native plants and buy them. Some man who had been in this business, just a few months ago, for some reason, I don't know if he went out of business or what the story was, but he donated, I think, 1,000 or so pots of various types of native plants to the Valley Nature Center in Weslaco, and they put them up for sale. We have a 6-acre plot there at Weslaco that has some native vegetation on it, and they planted, as much as they could there, and then they put the other up for sale, and they put a little ad in the paper, and people came from all over the valley, came down there to buy these native plants, which I think after the 2 severe freezes we had in 83 and 84, 84 and 85, I don't remember, a couple of years ago, we had freezes that killed most of the exotic lawn, garden plants. And so people are beginning to look for native plants that they can use around their grounds and homes and all. And this of course, increases bird population by providing nesting sites for birds that live in suburban areas. I think one of the most apt descriptions that I've ever heard of Santa Ana is, and you hear they call it this or that, but some people have likened Santa Ana to a tropical gem in a sea of agriculture. And that's just about right. See, this used to be called the Magic Valley. This country never ceases to amaze me. Whenever it has a chance, it comes back. Whenever I come, I feel like I'm at home.